The systemic aspect of tackling inequality simply means what we are suffering from today is a result of a certain way of thinking, which unfortunately was led by liberalism or neoliberal agenda, which would exploit nature, would exploit human beings, would concentrate wealth on one side. But they take away from this kind of workshop, you say, look, let's change our way of thinking. Let's change our narrative about development. The narrative about development has become more inclusive, involving not only human beings, but also nature, the ecosystem. And the ecosystem simply means not just Europe, but also Amazonia, also Africa. The heat in Burkina Faso is now even being superseded by the heat in Montreal. In other words, the action being taken in Brussels today will affect what is happening not only in Burkina Faso or in Canada, but the destruction of the Amazonia in Brazil will bring more heat in Brussels. Therefore, Brussels can no longer afford to take decisions and draft policies without taking into consideration what is happening in Namibia, what is happening in Iceland, what is happening in Salvador. Every policy taken locally must reflect the consequences globally. The most beautiful things I have from the SDG agenda is leave no one behind, means you have to get the appropriate data that tells you who effectively has been left behind. So in my daily work, we are first of all concerned with identifying those who have been left behind. They may be women, they may be people living with disabilities, they may be youth. But once you identify them, then you target them with an action that will bring them in because they have been left out. So right now, we are concerned with bringing in people with disabilities who have been brought in, who organize themselves to ensure that there was a bill targeting them by the state, which for now in Nigeria is compelling all ministries and departments and agencies to ensure to reserve 20% of their available jobs for people living with disability. And as NGOs, we are also now compelled to ensure that we have disabled as part of our day-to-day workers. And we have been doing that. We have not reached the 20%, but 2, 3, 4 people already employed on a full-time basis, despite the fact that they were disabled. And traditionally, in our tradition, they are considered as a curse rather than a blessing. So bringing them to be visible is a great contribution to changing the way people think about disability. First of all, make sure that the people who are being left behind in Europe are addressed. That's number one. Number two, make sure that the civil society groups in developing countries are actually given enough means in terms of empowerment for them to become more visible and have the capacity to challenge what their respective governments are doing. So data for governance in Africa and in other developing countries should no longer remain the business of the multinational institutions like the IMF and World Bank. It should also become the data generated by the people who are themselves affected by marginalization, by inequality, and in this case, people who are non-state actors. Civil society should be the priority of institutions like European Union.